In the last section, we talked about bacteria and viruses, which are sort of our regular, well-known microorganisms. There are these, we're going to talk about other microorganisms in this section. There are these guys, Chlamydia, Rickettsiae, and Mycoplasmas, and they have some similarities to both bacteria and viruses. Like bacteria, they replicate by binary fission, but they lack some basic component. So they are obligate intracellular parasites. They need living cells to reproduce. They are generally classified as bacteria because of their manner of replication, but they don't grow on artificial media. So they need that cell somehow to produce. So Chlamydia, in particular, are considered primitive forms related to bacteria. They just don't have a lot of the enzymes that they need for metabolic processes. And they have some different forms that they exist in, which is, that kind of interesting. Rickettsiae are like tiny gram-negative bacteria that live inside a host cell, and they're transmitted by insect vectors like lice or ticks. And they cause diseases like typhus fever and Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So they attack our blood vessel walls, and they cause a rash and tiny little hemorrhages. And then mycoplasma infection is a common cause of pneumonia. So they don't have cell walls, and so they're not affected by a lot of the antimicrobial drugs, because a lot of the antimicrobial drugs attack the cell wall. They're kind of the smallest ones, and so they can be dangerous because pneumonia can kill you. So when we talk about pneumonia, and we'll talk about this in next quarter in the respiratory chapter, there are bacterial pneumonias, there are mycoplasmic pneumonias, there are viral pneumonias, and there are mechanical pneumonias. So not only can pneumonia kill you, a lot of different things can give it to you. So fungi, there are lots of fungi in the world. Some of them are good and some are bad. Some of them we slice them up and eat them for dinner, like mushrooms. So fungi are eukaryotic organisms. A lot of the larger ones, like portobello mushrooms, are obviously not microscopic, but they're also microscopic fungi. So you find them all over the place. They're in animals, plants, humans, food. Fungal or mycotic infections from single-celled yeast or multicellular molds are common. Only a few fungi are pathogenic. That a lot of times they can cause primary infection on skin or mucous membranes, but they can spread systemically in an immunosuppressed person. So thrush is a fungal infection that often occurs with immunosuppressed people in their mucous membranes. So these are just some examples of fungal diseases. So histoplasmosis or histoplasma causes neurological disease and can be transmitted to the embryo or fetus if the mother's infected. So that one is usually transmitted by mice or sometimes in soil. So wash your vegetables, I guess, is the thing to that. Tinea pedis is athlete's foot. It's a fungal disease, and there is treatment for it. Candida is usually harmless, but it's opportunistic. So Candida is the causative agent of thrush and vaginitis. So when they talk about having a yeast infection, Candida is the organism. Pneumocystis jirovecii is an opportunistic organism, another one that causes pneumonia. It's fungal pneumonia. It's a weird organism. It has some characteristics of fungi and some of protozoa. So they're both eukaryotes, but it's kind of in its own little subcategory. So this is a micrograph of Candida, which is our yeast infection yeast. This is the oral version, which is thrush. So protozoa are another eukaryotic form. They are unicellular. They don't have a cell wall like bacteria, so it's hard to get them with antibiotics. A lot of them kind of just hang out in ponds and stuff, and they live independently. And some of them are obligate parasites, meaning that they need another cell to produce. So the ones that are pathogenic are usually the parasitic ones. And so the examples of the protozoal diseases are like trichomoniasis, malaria, and amoebic dysentery. So they're pretty serious little beasts. Pretty under the microscope, though. Trichomonas is another. It's caused by a protozoa. The Trichomonas is a specific protozoa that causes trichomoniasis, and these are just some cool micrographs of them. And there are their references below. So other microscopic agents of disease. Helminths are flatworms or roundworms. So they're not, strictly speaking, microorganisms, because sometimes they can be seen without a microscope. They can be up to 1 meter in length or super tiny. But they're parasites. And they have a life cycle with at least 3 stages. So they have an ovum, a larva, and an adult form. They enter the body either through the skin or by getting ingested, depending on the species. Infections are more commonly found in young children, but they can be life-threatening in an immunosuppressed person. So the Helminth diseases are pinworms, hookworms, tapeworms, and roundworms. These ascaris, they're the giant roundworms, and they're ingested with food that's been grown in contaminated soil, feces-contaminated soil, or prepared with hands that have been in feces-contaminated soil. So, icky, icky. So, like pinworms, they're inhaled in dust in contaminated areas. So that's pretty hard to keep from getting it, and it's common in children. And hookworms enter the skin from fecally contaminated soil. So clean soil and clean water is a pretty important topic in the world, in world health. And tapeworms are most commonly transmitted by larvae in undercooked pork. So if you eat pork, cook it really well. Here's a pinworm under the microscope. Creepy looking little thing. Tapeworm, you can see how big it is. 3 centimeters. Well, and that's just part of it. It's long. So there are these weird little thingies. They're not cells, they're not bacteria, they're not viruses, they're not fungus. They are protein-like agents that change the shapes of proteins within host cells. They're called prions. And they're transmitted by contaminated tissues. So mad cow disease is a prion disease, either by ingestion of meat or infected blood or donor organs. So they cause degenerative disease of the nervous system. So human prion disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, that's the official name of mad cow. They're both rapidly progressive and fatal. So if you get them, there's nothing to be done about it. So these are bad. These are bad boys. We have on many parts of our body a resident population of mixed microorganisms, and we call them our normal flora. So in our skin, in our nasal cavity and mouth, in our gut, and the ones in our gut really help with a lot of digestion, in the vagina and the urethra. So a lot of our normal flora, one of the things that they do for us is they take up space to not let the bad guys get in. But these guys can be opportunistic pathogens if they get in the wrong place. Excuse me.